So,
Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully the rest of the registrants trickle in as they come, as they can. So yeah, with that, I'll just begin. Good morning and welcome to our 48th online gathering for Synod, rostered, and lay leaders. This monthly gathering is called Coaching for All Seasons, and it is sponsored by your Pacifica Synod coaches. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sarah Tees, and I am the Director of Coaching for Pacifica Synod. I am also one of your facilitators today. Our coaching team has cultivated this monthly gathering for church leaders across the Synod. We hope you find the information here helpful as you navigate caring ministries in your community. This is meant to be a time of insight and learning, and it is meant to be a brave space for you to feel free and capable of safely acknowledging who you are and how you are doing. And with that, I'm going to introduce my colleague and friend, Carol. Carol, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Sarah. Happy to. We are so pleased to have the Reverend Eric Shafer with us today. Eric is a pastor of the ELCA, and he is Global Refuge's pastor in residence. Global Refuge is the new name for Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, which has been supporting refugees and migrants coming to the U.S. since 1939. Before joining Global Refuge's staff, Eric was the senior pastor at Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Santa Monica, California, for more than 8 years. Under his leadership, Mount Olive established the first shelter for homeless college students in the U.S. The shelter opened in October 2016 and attracted media coverage throughout the country. Eric received various awards and recognition for his role in this enterprise. While in Santa Monica, Eric also contributed to a number of community-based efforts, including founding the Santa Monica Area Interfaith Council and serving on several organizations addressing hunger and human rights. In addition, he hosted 65 episodes of a YouTube program, Hope Matters. Before coming to California in 2014, Eric was a senior vice president for Odyssey Networks in New York City, where he led efforts to open membership to faith groups beyond Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Prior to his tenure at Odyssey, he served as senior pastor of Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, at that time the 9th largest congregation in the ELCA. His career path also includes Director of Communication for the ELCA in Chicago, assistant to the Bishop of the ELCA's Northeastern Pennsylvania Synod in Allentown, and pastor of Holy Trinity Memorial Lutheran Church in Catasauqua, Pennsylvania. Eric's work includes producing 2 CBS television Christmas Eve specials and the stop-motion animation children's program, Davy and Goliath. To round out his resume, Eric has extensive international expertise, including time teaching in South Africa and Madagascar, and multiple trips to Jerusalem and the West Bank. Welcome, Eric. We're glad you're here.
Carol, would the folks mind giving me a quick introduction of the folks that are with us? That would be very helpful to me.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Dan.
I'm Dina, and I am a coach in the Pacifica Synod, and I also work for First Lutheran Church as their administrator and pantry coordinator.
First Lutheran Church where, Dina?
In Fullerton.
In Fullerton, okay. I am scheduled to come there in the new year.
Oh, fantastic.
We haven't set a specific date, but your pastor has been in touch.
Oh, I will look forward to that. I will look forward to meeting you in person. Wonderful.
Good. Ken, you were going to jump in.
Well, of course, that part of my personality anyway. Very good. Anyway, I'm the interim pastor at Trinity Lutheran in Victorville, 1/3 time. So anyway, but I'm 74 years old. So, and when I'm done at Victorville, I'll retire for the 4th time. And we'll see how Synod does with regard to their interim ministry needs. Anyway, But my concern today is, in particular, we have a Syrian family. In fact, we found out that there are 25 Syrian families living across the street from in an apartment complex from the church. They've also been identified for us, and not specifically identified, that there's over 100 Syrian families in the Victorville area. And the one individual who is very active at the church, who came over on a visa and is now, I believe, working toward his citizenship, is very active, but he'd like to get his 30-year-old daughter and grandchild here. So my main concern today, what do we do? How do we sponsor or whatever?
Yeah, so let's do this, Ken, because obviously, you know, I as you can imagine, I'm involved in another part of our work. Would you send me an email
Sure.
with this information that you need, that I can send it on to the office and put you in touch with the right person? Which makes a lot of sense.
And I've tried to communicate with your office and gotten no response. So
okay, well,
yeah.
I'm sorry about that. As you can imagine, they're a bit overwhelmed, but that's
well, I would imagine so. And part of the concern is, and my hope is, with the not Syrian, but I believe he's a Arab-speaking seminarian graduate who's coming into the synod at the end of this year, that there'll be more persons from from that perspective. What's your email, Eric?
So it's, you see my name under my picture.
Yes.
Put my middle initial in. So there's 2 C's, Eric C. Shafer at hotmail.com.
Okay. So just Eric period C?
No periods, all one word with the 2 C's.
And what's it at?
Hotmail.
Hotmail? Okay.
And Ken, there also is a new Muslim agency in our territory that's really outstanding, and I'll do a little research to find them. And I think they're going to be the people to help you, and I think that they can. So that's the important thing.
Well, this family is Syrian Orthodox,
right? But
so,
that wouldn't matter. But but they might. But the language, they would have the language.
Okay. It's hotmail.com.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. And the other question maybe you can research. We've been recommended to try and talk to an immigration lawyer, but I have absolutely no idea how to search that.
Right. And I don't know what we would know about local immigration lawyers, but let me see what I can find out. So put that in the note.
All right.
Put that in the note. And
that's just all this.
Right. Great.
I'm Joanne Larson. I'm one of the coaches. I transferred or moved from Southern California to Colorado Springs a few years ago, so I'm here from Colorado.
Wonderful. And your bookcase looks just like mine. Look at that.
We probably dealt with the same company.
Oh no. But there we are. So all right. Well, I think is that everybody? Carol, did you say what you do when you're not on Zooms?
I am a leadership coach part-time, and many of my clients are clergy and nonprofit professionals. I am a member of Christ Lutheran Church in Pacific Beach in San Diego. And as you know, of course, San Diego sits right at the border. Christ had for 6 years walked with an Eritrean family through the refugee process. And it took that long for their refugee status to be established, which it finally was within the last year.
Great. Did you have Carla at your church last Sunday from our staff?
Possibly, but I wasn't there.
Yeah, I think she preached at I was afraid that would embarrass you, and I didn't mean to.
No, that's quite all right.
At Pacific Beach this past Sunday, and she's still here in Southern California right now. That's one of my colleagues on Global Refuge. There's several of us that work in California. So, okay. I want to do a couple things. I'll tell you, you've heard too much about my biography, but I'll tell you a little bit more about what I do for Global Refuge. And then I want to talk about a little bit about Global Refuge, but I'm going to make an assumption that you folks know that I don't have to do Global Refuge 101 with you. But more importantly, I want to talk about the current situation, because obviously with the election coming up, it's pretty dramatic and things like that. So I am the pastor in residence for Global Refuge. That's a title I made up. And I started this position the day after I retired in Santa Monica, so I flunked retirement like Ken. And I am technically retired, but I am working. It's supposed to be part-time. You know, my agreement is 2 engagements a month, but it's been more than that, and that's my own fault. And but I'm happy to do it. My territory is California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado, which those of you who know ELCA speak, that's region 2. I can visit anywhere in the country, really. So basically what I do, well, besides things like this and other things, I go out on weekends and I preach at Lutheran churches, do adult forums, and basically tell the story of Global Refuge and raise friends and money, to be honest. So that's what we do. As you heard, Global Refuge is the new name for Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service. We changed our name in January after 2 years of exhaustive study. If someone wants to know a little bit about why, we can talk about that in questions. It's an 85-year-old organization, as you heard in the introduction. So, you know, we've been around doing this. Over those 85 years, we have placed in Lutheran congregations in the US 750,000 refugees. Be impressive. Last year, we were able to place more than 18,000. And that was a good year for us in the rebuilding, which was necessary from the former administration. We do more, though, than work with the traditional refugees coming through the State Department system. We work with migrants and immigrants. We have welcome centers in several places along the border. We have refugee centers across the country. We recently started a bank for microloan for immigrants and refugees families to start a small business. We work with U.S. businesses who are eager to have employees in the many positions that aren't filled. One of the many myths, of course, about immigration is that people are taking jobs from somebody else, which is not true. We can talk about that too. And we work in Washington, D.C. We have people that comment on legislation, and our CEO, Krish, is very popular with the news media, and you see her often quoted about issues of immigration and refugees in the U.S. and around the world. So there are 117 million refugees in the world, which is a mind-boggling number. And many of them are showing up at our southern border and other places around the country. So I want to talk to you a little bit, assuming that that's enough background on Global Refuge. I want to talk a little bit about the situation now. And the most important thing I want to tell you today is that no matter how the election goes, we'll still be here. Around for 85 years, we're not going anywhere. Now, that said, one of the candidates for president, besides saying he's going to deport 15 million people, has said he will shut down refugee resettlement on day 1 of his office, which would definitely put a great pressure on our work. But Lutherans have been doing this for years. There's no reason to expect that they won't continue to do it. But here are some of the challenges that we have today in the refugee, immigration, and migrant focus in this country. You've heard it said, I think, that we have a broken immigration system. That's often in the media. And we say not broken, we say old. We are operating under the 1965 Immigration Act. Now you can do the math, 35, 45, 55, 59 years old. In 1965, that was a very progressive act. It, for the first time, set quotas for regular refugees from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It was less racist than the work in the past. And so, but now it's just old and tired. Under that act, 600,000 refugees can come in at any time in any country. And these are the refugees that come in through the traditional system of State Department approved in their country of origin or in refugee camps, great background checks, vetting, all those things. And then they come in sponsored by congregations of various faiths, and more recently, they can even be sponsored by individual families. There are 10 different organizations that work with the refugee system as approved by the UN and the State Department to do that here in this country. Global Refuge is one of those. They are all faith related, Christian and Jewish, and we are the largest. Even though Catholic Relief Services, Catholic Church is much larger, Lutherans have been doing this longer and, might I say, better than anyone else for a long time. So we have an old system. And we must say, Global Refuge is non-political, has to be. We have to work with whatever party's in power. But I would say to you, plague on both our parties. Both our political parties, when they had majorities in Congress and said they wanted to reform immigration, didn't do it. So it's not just, now the most recent activity, when President Biden got through the Senate and had enough votes from Republicans and Democrats in the House to pass an Immigration Reform Act, that was kiboshed by the Republican candidate for president, who really wanted to run on this issue and didn't want a settlement before the election. It was not an act that we approved everything of, but it sure beat what we have now. But, both parties claim they want to solve the immigration problem, and neither of them do it because it's better to run on fear. And that's part of it. Or to be more kind to them, it's just not a very popular issue to work on. During the last administration, the first Trump administration, the normal 125,000 plus number of refugees to be admitted was cut back to 10,000. What that meant State Department workers were sent home. Immigration judges were reassigned. Homeland Security people who worked with refugees were reassigned. So this current administration has spent most of the last 3.5 years rebuilding the system. We did get back to 125,000 last year, and we should be at 125,000 this year. We've been as high as 400,000 and 500,000 in the days following the Vietnam War, so we could certainly do more. And then you have the challenges of the fall of Afghanistan and the war in Ukraine. In both those cases, President Biden said, did an executive order to bring refugees in above the 125,000 without the quotas for those nations. And about 150,000 Afghans were brought in and about 150,000 Ukrainians. Now, the Afghans were brought in under this executive order, which expired in August. So technically, the Afghans could be sent home. Now, you all know that would make no sense at all. There's no home for them to go to. And the women that would be sent back would probably be killed. And anyone that cooperated with our government, which is most of these refugees, would be killed. So we have to get Congress to approve the Afghan Adjustment Act to allow them to get into the regular refugee system. But even though they haven't, it's my belief nothing will ever happen because our veterans would not let any of the Afghans be sent home. They would rise up and our churches would protect them. We'll need a similar act for the Ukrainians, which will have to happen sometime in the next year because the Ukrainians have been here now. Sadly, they're in their second year. And again, after the war in Ukraine ends, God help us soon, they will be able to go home if they want, but you've seen the news. They bombed out areas of eastern Ukraine. It's unlikely they'll be able to go home. Some may. So those are two things that have really strained the whole system. Add to that the collapse of the government in Venezuela, the continued collapse of the government in Haiti, and the more recent collapse of the government in Ecuador. And you have part of the mess that we have. And then add to it the crisis at our southern border. You've all heard presentations from your Pastor Maria. It's interesting that Pastor Maria reports that the complexion from countries where people are from at the southern border is changing dramatically. As you've heard, it's no longer majority Spanish speaking. There are people coming from all over the world. Why is that? Because Mexico allows you to buy a tourist visa and enter the country from anywhere. So people spend their life savings, buy a ticket from Africa, come to Mexico, and end up at our southern border requesting asylum. And that's part of the mix of what's going on and needs to be fixed. But asylum is one of the key things that we need to say. You've heard a lot in this election about illegal aliens, and 90% of the people at our southern border are requesting asylum. If you're requesting asylum, that's a legal right. It's an international legal right, and it is a right in US law. Therefore, the overwhelming majority of the people coming across the southern border are not illegal. Just like the Haitians in Springfield and Charleroi are not illegal. I lived in Springfield for a while. They're here on protected status. That's another category of special help. But the majority of people coming into this country over the southern border are not illegal. And as you know, living where we do, the southern border doesn't look crazy like you see on the news when they go to one particular town in Texas to show how bad it is. The San Diego border is just not that crazy. It's much more orderly and always has been. But they're asylum seekers. They're not illegals. They don't take jobs from people here. There are 10 million vacant jobs in this country. Vacant jobs that current citizens, Black and white, Hispanic, do not want. And so we desperately need them. We know in California how important they are for farming and how farms are going to be complete. If Trump is elected and if he's able to carry out this mass deportation, that will shut down the farming industry in this country because it's totally dependent on immigrants, many of whom are undocumented. Incidentally, we like to use the word undocumented rather than illegal because, as I said, asylum seekers who are coming across, the majority are still undocumented. They may be undocumented, but they're not illegal. So that's some of the background. And I always say when I do this sort of presentation, people say, what can we do? We can pray. We believe in prayer, but we don't want to stop there. We can make a donation to organizations like Global Refuge. We can write letters to our people in Congress. We can sign up for our newsletter at globalrefuge.org. We have two programs that congregations love. One is called Hope for the Holidays, which sends holiday greeting cards to people in detention centers and other refugees. And then we have a program called Fresh Change, which prepares a cloth bag of clothing to be given to people who come across the border with just the clothing on their back. Both of those are outlined on our website. And so those are some of the things we can all do. That's kind of an overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And, you know, I would say just further about, we're preparing for whatever happens in the election. We're preparing if either person is elected, and if Trump is elected, we're preparing for whether he gets control of both houses of Congress or whether he just gets control of one. Obviously, that will be a different, you know, we're preparing the legal challenge to deporting 15 million people. We'll be ready for whatever happens. That's why I'm saying we're not going anywhere. Global Refuge is hoping to be around for another 85 years or more. So, any questions you'd like to ask me?
Pastor Eric, you referenced the recent bill that Trump said, no, don't do that. What about that bill did you like? And what about that bill do you wish is different? Because it sounds like Kamala Harris, if she gets elected and sticks to her word, is going to try to get it passed.
Yes. So what we liked as an agency was the fact that it was some reform, some kind of reform. We did like the fact that there'd be more border control agents. Most border control agents are compassionate people, and they do get overwhelmed at times. So anytime we can add to that, we especially like that it added to immigration judges. When you come across the border in San Diego and you request asylum, you get a date with an asylum judge, and I believe they're up to 7 years from now. And then they say bye. And that's where the church people come in and try to help these people in that time. So increasing the number of immigration judges to speed up the asylum process. Now, the reality is that many people get sent home, get sent back. They don't get asylum, but at least we'd have a fairer process going. And so the more asylum judges, the thing we didn't like is it was going to enshrine what Biden has put in place to really limit the number of people who can come across requesting asylum. Obviously, if we have more staff, we can have more people coming too who are requesting asylum. That's an overview. I'm sure there are more specifics, but generally we liked it because it was better than what we had in a lot of ways, as you can hear. But the, you know, harsh on immigrants, and that's the part we didn't like as much.
Thank you.
And one of my favorite stories, since we have a moment here about this whole thing, is, do you remember the it was now I think 2 years ago when Tucker Carlson on Fox News told the governor of Florida to send so-called illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. Do you remember that story in the news? Well, this is the moral of this story is that God has a sense of humor. So the governor of Florida employed two, I would call them coyotes, mules, whatever you want to call them, to go to Texas. He didn't do it in Florida, to go to Texas and round up 50 people, 25 on each plane, and send them to Martha's Vineyard. These were mostly Venezuelans and mostly people who hadn't date for an asylum hearing. So they weren't illegal. They had summer clothes, sandals and shorts and short sleeve shirts and no other clothing. And were not told where they were going to go. They were told they were going to go to a good place where there would be a job for them, which was a lie. And they were herded up and put on these planes to Martha's Vineyard. Now, I owned a condo in Martha's Vineyard for a while. We bought it when they were cheap. And I can tell you that Martha's Vineyard in the fall, when the planes were sent, is pretty sparsely populated. In the summertime, they have 150,000 people. In the wintertime, about 10,000. Mostly school teachers, hospital workers, firefighters, those kind of people are left because this tourism is a summer thing. And Martha's Vineyard is cold. in the fall. But the planes arrived unannounced. Again, they didn't warn them they're coming. And the Christians and Jews in Martha's Vineyard gathered together and really did what they could to welcome them and host them. Okay, that's the basic story. But here's what happened. A sheriff in the county of Texas where this happened determined that a crime was committed against these people. And by doing that, when a crime is committed against an immigrant, they get an immediate visa to work and stay. So all these people immediately got visas to work and stay. That's why I say God has a sense of humor. And they have, some have remained on Martha's Vineyard, others have gone all over the country, but they're now allowed to stay here and are in the system to become citizens. So exactly the opposite of what the governor of Florida and Tucker Carlson wanted to happen happened. Now, the interesting part of that is, I don't know the results of this, but the sheriff was planning to file charges against the two people that organized it and against the governor of Florida. I think we would have heard if he ever did the governor of Florida, but I haven't heard anything about the people in Texas. But at least the refugees, the immigrants are safe and are able to stay and work. That's as I say, God has a sense of humor in that story. So it's a good story. Other questions or comments?
In a perfect world, how would you address the refugee issue? It looks like we're only just going to get more refugees, and more countries are going to say, no thanks.
Yeah, I think in a perfect world, and talk about the world, not just the USA, more countries will be willing to accept people from other countries that have to leave their country through no fault of their own. You know, the next huge crisis is already there in Africa, with the drought in Africa and all these farmers who want to support their families and are moving. We're going to see more people at our southern border from Africa because they're going to use their life savings to get here. And in a perfect world, countries would have generous numbers to allow people in. Europe is in worse shape than we are for workers. You know, all of the major European countries are aging more rapidly than we are. And you know, some of the Syrian stories of immigrants in Europe have been amazing, that whole towns have been revised in Germany, for example, who had no young people in their schools and now do. And, you know, and speaking of towns being revived, the city of Springfield, which was a pit when I was there, has been revived by these Haitians who bought up the bad housing stock in the south side of town and fixed it up. So it's a success story in many ways, with some outstanding, you know, issues still there that are, you know, that are single issues that have been lifted up to be as if there's more going on. So in a perfect world, we would have a more robust system in this country, and more robust numbers, more robust staffing, so more people could be processed. We still want to keep terrorists out. And this, you know, we still want to keep, you know, drug dealers out. So there has to be some control at our border. But you could make an argument, I'm not making it, we're not making it, for a pretty porous border because we need the workers. You know, I love it when I go out and talk, and there are farmers in the audience, because every farmer in any part of this country uses undocumented people. Apple farmers in Pennsylvania, cherry farmers in Michigan, tomato farmers in Ohio, farmers of all the goods here in California. They all get it. And so a perfect world, we would have a much more robust, you know, system of allowing people in, and it wouldn't be as racist as it is now. In the perfect world, Joanne, you know, because the system, although the 65 bill improved that, it's still a pretty racist system. because fear, fear is still there. And we'd have much higher numbers from people from poorer countries who want to come here to work. We need them. I was in a restaurant in California recently, and I went to the men's room, and there's a sign in the men's room. It said, "Please be patient with us. We can't get enough staff. Your food's going to be late." And before this crisis, before the pandemic especially, if you went into almost any restaurant in LA, Chinese restaurant, German restaurant, French restaurant, you know who was doing the dishes in the back room. It wasn't. In the Chinese restaurants, yeah, they had Chinese in the front room, but in the back room were probably Spanish-speaking people doing the dishes. And, so in a perfect world, much more robust, much more help. And the other thing is, in a perfect world, we would help countries like countries in Central America so people don't have to leave. If we could ever get a stable government in Haiti, Haiti's a beautiful place. Do you think anyone wants to uproot their family, leave their friends and extended family, go to another country with no money and no food and no clothing? Of course they don't. They'd rather make an income where they are. Sure, some people would have always loved to come to the US because we are still a land of opportunity, no question. But do you think all those Afghans wanted to come here? Do you think any of those Ukrainians wanted to come here? No. So we have to have something in our system to allow for what President Biden did to bring these people in. So two things: if the first world countries, so to use that term, would have a more robust program of bringing people in that they need anyway, and they would also then use their power and money to improve the lot of the people where they are. Stable governments would stop an awful lot of people leaving Central and South American countries. What's the number I heard? 6 or 8 million people have left Venezuela. Those people didn't want to leave Venezuela. And if the dictator had allowed the person that we all believe was actually elected in their recent election, none of those people would go home. So stability in countries around the world, and then a more open borders for people who are needed. Those would be the perfect world, I guess. It's a good question. It's fun to think about that. The closest we ever got to that was probably right after World War II, when the West put massive amounts of money into Europe in the Marshall Plan to rebuild it, and we allowed. There was a program until 1954 that anyone fleeing communism in the East was welcome in the US. And LIRS, Global Refuge, was the agency that brought these people, because many of them from Germany were Lutherans at that point. It was not perfect, talk to Jews, for example, was far from perfect, but it was more perfect than what we have now.
Eric, you said a couple. Oh, go ahead, Joanne.
Well, I was just going to quickly say, in my church here in Colorado Springs, I belong to First Lutheran, and Lutheran Family Services rents some space in our office building for their asylee and refugee program. And it's a real pleasure to happen to go to church, and here are the Afghans out in the parking lot practicing putting in car seats in their cars in the correct positions.
And Joanne, there are agency. We are like Lutheran World Relief in the sense that we don't have staff all over the country. We work through mostly Lutheran agencies, but actually we work through Catholic Relief Services in some places and other agencies. So in Colorado, our agency is the one that you're experiencing. They are us. They
Mhm.
do the groundwork. Which is why, why we don't have staff to come in to help Ken directly, for example, because we always work through the local social service agency. So that's how we do our work. And we give them financial support to do it.
It's a very successful program. And we have a number of people from the congregation who act as navigators with new asylees to help them get established, like getting a bank account, getting
Yeah.
their driver's license, those kinds of things. You learn a lot about people when you guide them through that system.
As you know, a job and driver's license is really, those are the basics. Apartment, job and driver's license.
Yeah.
And then the people want to work 2 and 3 jobs sometimes. So,
I'm done now, Carol.
That's okay, Joanne. It kind of leads into what I was thinking about, because I suspect that the result of being in contact with these people has helped alleviate some fear that might have been there before they arrived, because we sometimes fear what we don't know. And
that's right.
that's
That's
what
right.
was going through my mind, Eric, when you said the rational look at things says there are jobs going begging for people to do them in this country. The irrational response is, no, they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do we, in my experience, you can't address an irrational thought process with rational thinking and facts, because it just it doesn't connect. How do we talk to people who are coming out of their fears on these matters?
Ask the basic question of politics in 2024 too. I mean, we have political system now based on fear. And, if you don't believe the facts, or if you have your own alternative facts to use the speak these days, that's so, you can't argue with a person that doesn't accept. You can't argue with a person about the job example, if they just don't accept that there are these jobs going vacant. So you almost have to have Joanne's example of some personal experience, and that's a tough one when the current situation stokes the fear. Once people have the experience again and again and again, it breaks it down. Everywhere I go, I hear stories from older people about how they worked with Vietnamese refugees and Cambodian refugees in the 70s, and it changed their lives, and it changed their congregation's lives. And so, I think the answer is keep on keeping on. I guess we have to keep doing what we're doing and show that that's not true. And try to keep the crazies from making it worse.
It's easy to demonize someone you don't know, and
right.
much harder when they have a face.
Ken had his hand up, I think. Ken?
Yeah, thank you. And just as a sidelight, when I was on internship back in the 1970s, that decade, I remember what day. Anyway, the church I was at with my internship, we sponsored a Vietnamese couple. And we had a very good relationship with them, even though they were Roman Catholic and not Lutheran. But it was a very important time for us. So I look forward to being able to do that. Eric, I look forward to communicating with you, but part of the, let me ask you a question. So who covers, you were talking to Joanne about the organization over there. What organization in California covers the high desert?
I believe you are, you're still Pacifica Synod, right?
Correct.
In Victorville? Okay. In Pacifica Synod, it's been Catholic Relief Services. They have been our agency.
Oh,
however, there's a change coming, and that's why this this Muslim agency, which is really fine. So I think that's going to help us a lot in Southern California. There have, to be honest with you, there have been some complaints about our agency here.
Okay.
So
Well, I look
trying-
forward to communicating by email. Part of it is too, one of the things our council's struggling with is, what does the word sponsorship mean? And that's part of why we need some guidance on the process and what's going on. Anyway.
Yeah,
so
and
look forward to
you know, Ken, from your experience with the Vietnamese family, that sponsorship traditionally means that when the traditional refugee gets off the plane, if they're coming through the State Department, they get $1,300 per person from the government and a bill for their plane ride. But you know, that won't last very long. So traditionally, congregations have found the first apartment, paid the initial rent, help them find jobs, help them find a car, because almost to a person, these people don't want a handout, and as soon as possible, they want to pay the rent, they want to pay for the car, they want to pay you back. So there's some fundraising involved, and then there's, you know, finding housing and furnishing housing. That's been the part of the sponsoring congregation or family, you know, and still is. We're almost out of time. I see we are out of time, I guess. What else would you like to do today?
You know, Eric, I was wondering if you would share, as sort of a closing thought, what gives you hope in the work that you're doing? Just because I do think it's very easy to be discouraged by you know, what's happening all around the world and sort of the state of things. And I think it's important to highlight where we see hope.
Sure. I heard in my bio that my COVID project was a video program, a YouTube program where I interviewed people about hope. Hope matters. I had people that told me they didn't have hope, but most of them talked about hope. Well, when I hear the stories of immigrants and refugees with whom we work, that brings me hope. You know, the mayor of Helena, Montana is a refugee from Liberia, and now he's mayor in Montana, and he's a Black person. I mean, you know, wow. And he's really good. And, you know, you have stories like that. I think just like the Bible stories, you know, support us, I think these success stories support us. You know, we're, because we can't, that's why I started by saying we're going to be here no matter what. You know, if you want to look at the election and the campaign and what one particular party is saying about people, you can get really discouraged. But you know, there are so many stories. Look what we were able to do for Afghans and Ukrainians almost overnight. Even back in the first Trump administration, he called on us to find foster homes for those children in cages. And within weeks, we had 5,600 kids in foster care and out of those cages. So I continue to have hope that we can do our piece and expand it. We had 60 staff during the last administration. This year we'll have 750. So we are rolling, and unless this election, you know, really messes us up, we're going to keep going at those levels. That gives me a lot of hope and excitement for the work, and seeing our fund, and despite some Lutherans being upset about our name change, our giving is up from Lutherans. We used to be the agency that no one knew about, and they didn't do much fundraising, to be honest, like 10 years ago. And then 2 years ago, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife gave us $15 million. So, you know, that gives me a lot of hope and excitement, and pretty difficult to follow up that the next year. But anyway, that's how we got the bank started. You know, I mean, and that's how we got the job service started, you know, through that generous gift from Mackenzie Scott. So those kind of things give me hope. Having the chance to talk to folks like you and hearing the stories on the ground, hearing the goodwill of people, I don't, you can imagine that when I go out, I don't hear a lot of nasty stuff because those people self-select out. The worst I hear is, Uncle Joe is coming for Thanksgiving. He's a Trumper. How do I talk to him? And we're trying to develop some resources for that actually. But we have a great document on our website about myths. If you send me an email, I can send you a link to it and those kind of things. So I got hope. We have wonderful, now that I'm 74, everyone's younger than me, but we have this wonderful young staff at Global Refuge, many of whom are refugees themselves. They give me a lot of hope, and they're so excited about this work and wanting to do it right and well. That gives me hope.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And thank you for the resources you're offering too. That kind of equipping and that kind of toolkitting is something that we're very passionate about at Synod Coaching, and we'd love to be able to share that information with our participants and our mailing list and anyone who requests it. So yeah, I'll be sure and grab that resource from you as well.
There's a whole series of resources under congregational resources now, and new resources.
Oh,
We've
perfect.
actually added staff and resources since we dropped Lutheran from our name. And we actually didn't drop Lutheran from our name. In 50 states, we're registered as Lutheran Immigration Refugee Service with the states. So, it's a DBA name, and it helps us in foreign countries a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
There it is. But it's a DBA name, doing business as. So
Okay.
all right.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for participating in the conversation. We just want to acknowledge that we hold this gathering once a month on the first Thursday of the month. And next month, we will have Jonathan Wrights come and speak to us about AI and the many applications of AI and how it can help you with your ministries and how it can help you with your resourcing and your reaching out to the communities. So we look forward to that. So if you registered for this event, you're also registered for that one. And you'll be getting notices as it comes up. And if you don't have the information, look for it in the Synod e-newsletter, and the registration link will be in there as well. And we're so grateful for you to be here today. Eric, would you mind closing our session?
A quick question. Okay,
Oh, sure
question.
can.
How will I access and share the video?
Oh, it's on YouTube, and I will share it with you via email, the email that you registered with.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking that question, because you're right, I should mention that, that this recording will be made available on the Synod's YouTube channel. So yeah, but Pastor Eric, if you wouldn't mind closing us in prayer.
Sure, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Well, Lord, we thank you today, especially for these people, for this chance to be together, for being able to share some of our work with those less fortunate, some of our work which is commanded by you in all of our biblical writings. We ask you to continue to help us be people of hope, hoping for a better life for our neighbors and our new neighbors, and hoping and guide us in ways that we can understand how we might be part of the solution rather than the problem in these ways and so many others. We pray all these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for your time and your storytelling and your insights, Pastor Eric. Thank you, Ken, for joining us today. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Dina, for asking your questions and participating. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.